Your name is the oldest cage you live in. You've carried it so long you forgot someone gave it to you before you could refuse. And the strangest story in the Hebrew Bible is about a man who refused to let go of God until he got a new one. That man walked into the dark as Jacob. He limped out as Israel. And the distance between those two names is the most honest map of personal change ever written. The setup matters. Jacob is running. He's been running his entire adult life. He cheated his brother Esau out of a birthright. He tricked his blind father into giving him a blessing meant for someone else. He spent 20 years working for a father-in-law who kept changing the terms of the deal, and now Esau is coming toward him with 400 men, and Jacob has run out of geography. So he does something strange. He sends his wives, his children, his servants, and everything he owns across the river Jabbok. Every possession, every relationship, every marker of status. He strips himself down to nothing and stays behind, alone in the dark. That detail is easy to skip past. It shouldn't be. The ancient rabbinical commentators fixated on this moment. Why would a man about to face his greatest threat voluntarily isolate himself? Why send away every resource, every comfort, every buffer? The Talmud records a tradition that Jacob went back for small jars he'd left behind. Small jars. The man is about to face possible death and is crossing a river in the dark for pottery. Something else was pulling him back to that riverbank. Something he couldn't name yet. And then the wrestling begins. A figure appears. The text calls this figure a man in one verse, and later Jacob says he's seen the face of God. The encounter resists clean categories. It happens at night, in total darkness, with no witnesses. Two bodies locked together for hours. No weapons, no technique, just endurance and refusal. Think about how different this is from every other divine encounter in the text. Moses gets a burning bush and a voice. Abraham gets visitors and a meal. Elijah gets a whisper. Jacob gets a fight. A physical, grinding, hours-long fight where neither side wins cleanly. The hip socket gets wrenched out of joint during the struggle. Jacob is being damaged by the very encounter he refuses to release. Dawn starts breaking. The figure says, "Let me go." And Jacob, limping, exhausted, hip dislocated, says one of the most defiant lines in Scripture, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The figure asks a question that changes everything. What is your name? In ancient Hebrew culture, a name carried your identity, your story, your reputation. When Jacob answers, Jacob, he's saying more than a word. The name Yaakov literally means heel grabber or supplanter. It's the name given to a baby who came out of the womb gripping his twin brother's heel. It's a name that means schemer, trickster, the one who takes what belongs to others. So when the figure asks, "What is your name?" he's asking Jacob to say out loud who he's been, to confess the identity he's been operating under for decades. And Jacob does it. In the dark, with a destroyed hip, unable to run for the first time in his life, he speaks the name. The figure gives him a new one, Israel, one who wrestles with God, or God wrestles. The interpretations vary, but every version contains struggle at its center. The new identity doesn't erase the wrestling. It's built from the wrestling. This is where the story departs from every comfortable narrative about change. Jacob doesn't get his new name through meditation. He doesn't get it through obedience. He doesn't receive it on a mountaintop in a moment of clarity. He earns it in a fight that lasts all night and leaves him permanently injured. He walks with a limp for the rest of his life. The text makes this explicit. The transformation left a mark on his body that never healed. The rabbinical tradition spent centuries on the identity of the wrestling figure. Some said it was an angel. Some said it was the guardian spirit of Esau. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, offers a reading that cuts deeper. Jacob was wrestling with his own shadow, the part of himself he'd been running from. The schemer, the deceiver, the man who got everything he wanted through manipulation and still felt empty enough to cross a river alone in the dark for small jars. The medieval commentator Rashi noted that the Hebrew word for wrestled shares a root with the word for dust. They raised dust together. The transformation is dirty. Ground-level bodies in the dirt. This tracks with something psychologists started documenting thousands of years later. Genuine identity shifts almost always involve a period of acute discomfort, a confrontation with parts of yourself you've organized your entire life around avoiding. There's a reason Jacob had to be alone for this. Every other person in his life related to him as Jacob. His wives knew him as Jacob, his servants served Jacob, his children were born to Jacob. The social mirror kept reflecting the old name back at him. To encounter whatever waited on that riverbank, he had to step outside every relationship that confirmed who he'd been. You felt a version of this, maybe smaller. That period where you knew the old pattern was finished, but the new one hadn't arrived yet, where you couldn't go back to who you were, but moving forward meant sitting in a darkness you couldn't control. The space between identities has a texture, and the Genesis writers captured it. Night, water, isolation, a struggle with something you can barely see. The blessing itself deserves attention. Jacob doesn't ask for wealth or victory or safety from Esau. He asks for a blessing, which in this context means a new name, a new identity, and he has to hold on through an entire night of pain to get it. The figure could have given it immediately, could have appeared, renamed him, and left. Instead, the text stretches the encounter across the darkest hours. The blessing comes at dawn. Only at dawn. The timing is structural, woven into the narrative with intention. Dawn as the moment of identity shift appears across traditions, but the Genesis account adds a detail others leave out: the injury. Jacob, now Israel, rises with the sun and immediately limps. The people who saw him the next morning saw a man walking differently, literally. The transformation was visible in his gait before anyone heard the new name. His body told the story before his mouth could. The Jabbok itself is a wordplay the Hebrew audience would have caught instantly. Jabbok, Yaakov, Jacob. The river's name contains his old name. He crosses his own name to get to the other side. The geography is the metaphor. The water he has to cross is himself. One more layer. After the wrestling, after the new name, after the limp, Jacob goes out to meet Esau, the brother he cheated. The encounter he's been dreading for 20 years. And Esau runs to him, embraces him, and weeps. The reconciliation happens almost immediately. 20 years of fear dissolved in a single embrace, the obstacle that seemed insurmountable before the wrestling became simple. After it, as if the real barrier was never Esau at all. The real barrier was the man Jacob had been while facing Esau. Once that man died on the riverbank, the external conflict lost its power. This is the pattern the story encodes. The inner confrontation precedes the outer resolution. The identity shift, earned through pain, marked on the body, spoken aloud in darkness, reorganizes every relationship and circumstance around the new name. Jacob spent 20 years trying to solve an external problem. One night of wrestling with himself did what 2 decades of strategy couldn't. The ancient Hebrews preserved this story at the center of their national origin for a reason. They named themselves after it, Israel. The entire nation carries the name that means one who wrestles with God. The founding identity of the people is a struggle held through the night that leaves you changed and limping. Your name, the one you answer to inside your own head, the one that governs which choices feel available to you. That name was assigned before you knew what names meant. The Jabbok is still there. The riverbank is still dark. And the only way to the other side is through a night that costs you something you'll feel in your bones every morning after.